Nancy Pelosi just dropped $5 million of Apple stocks, traded Nvidia, Google, Amazon, but it's her smallest purchase that intrigues me the most. A mysterious bet on an AI healthcare company that could make us all a lot of money if the Wizard of Washington is right on this one. For those short on time, here's what matters. Pelosi's making a strategic pivot in her tech portfolio, but more importantly, she's taking her first ever position in Tempus AI, a company that's quietly revolutionizing healthcare through artificial intelligence. Why should we care? Well, Pelosi averages a 70% return on her tech investment since 2020, probably because she's got insider information. Yes, I said it. I think it's insider trading. It should be illegal, but it isn't. And we get to find out about it, which is kind of, well, almost as good as her not being allowed to trade. The timing of the disclosure is important. Donald J. Trump is back in office. We're seeing the most pro-business friendly administration the US has probably ever seen, certainly for decades. So this trade intrigues me. In fact, I think we're all going to make a load of money this year, because I think markets are going to go nuts. When the president releases meme coins and Nancy starts buying call options on AI stocks, I get excited. And I want you to get as excited as I am, because I think this is a generational opportunity to build more wealth this year and the coming year. How do you do that? Well, you need to actually be prepared for it. What does that mean? Well, you need to know the rules. You need to know when do you buy, when do you sell at the most basic level. And that sounds basic, and actually it is. I could teach you that in about half an hour. I'm going to do one better for you. I'm going to teach 3,000 people on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time exactly my strategy, how I'm going to attack 2025, the rules that I've used for over a decade and that made me, well, financially free. I want you to be able to do the same thing. And what's the best part? It's completely free. How do you join? You go to felixfriends.org/webinar. Link is down below. And you can see here on the screen, originally I made this 1,000 people webinar, but as Zoom shows you here, we now have 3,600 people approved. Now, I appreciate not every one of them is going to show up, but I am going to increase the number of people who can register here to 5,000. So there are 1,400 spots left, which sounds like a lot, but they will be gone by tomorrow. Now, let's jump back to Tempus AI. What makes this particularly fascinating? Of course, it is the timing here, right? So let's unpack exactly what's going on there. I'll show you the exact trade that she's done, how you could set it up right now, whether you should, what the risk is, and everything else. As a side story, she's also making bets on Alphabet, Amazon, and $1 million into Palo Alto networks, which is interesting. But what I wanted to understand is, why would somebody who makes these large bets on large tech companies get an interest in Tempus AI, this teeny tiny AI healthcare? Well, they're at the intersection of AI and healthcare, two sectors that we think are going to do really, really well under this new administration. And we expect the healthcare landscape to completely change under the Trump administration. They're pushing for what they call the smart healthcare solutions, and that means advanced diagnostics, data-driven insights, and just, AI doing its job. On Elon's LLM, his AI app Grok, which is built into X.com, you can already upload, say, your CAT scan or any kind of medical document, and it'll do the analysis for you. And it's pretty much as good as, if not better, than your average physician. And you gotta love Pelosi. She will take any opportunity to make herself money, even if it's, coming from the opposite side of the political aisle. That woman is just very, very narrowly focused on making America wealthier and her voters wealthier. That's the only thing she thinks about, of course, right? No self-interest whatsoever in that woman, right? Do you think people believe that, what I just said? Right, so let's dig a little bit deeper into this here. Why such a small stock? Well, what most people are missing is that smaller agile companies like Tempus AI could deliver explosive returns in this new Trump environment. They're not bogged down by the legacy systems or lots of bureaucratic red tape. They are nimble, they're fast, they're adapting. So what's Tempus AI doing? What do they actually build? Well, they built a platform that combines molecular profiling, real-world clinical data, so from real hospitals and so on, and advanced analytics. So imagine you could analyze millions of patient data points, genomic sequencing and treatment outcomes, all that simultaneously. Well, that is what Tempus AI do, and they apparently do it exceptionally well. Now, no congressman has ever bought or sold Tempus AI stock, but Nancy, she's got a nose for it, a little bit like Winston, very large nose, very good at sniffing out food or trade opportunities. And healthcare is, well, it's a cornerstone of congressional policy making. So it's very, very heavily regulated, and therefore politicians take an interest. Well, it's got me interested. Now, I could walk you through the whole ecosystem of Tempus, the products and so on. We've got down quite deep here. There's Tempus Hub, there's Tempus One, there's Tempus Now, there's Tempus Lens and so on. But essentially what it is just taking all that hospital data, millions of data points from patients, creating a brain that is better than 1,000 physicians, and then giving you back the results. That's essentially what they do. So it's kind of really, really cool analytics for making better treatment outcomes. So say you have a patient as a doctor, you got somebody in front of you, and well, how about you could access thousands of similar cases to see which treatment is most effective for the specific patient that's sitting in front of you, right? So no longer guesswork, no longer, let's see if the doctor read the latest research papers, which he probably hasn't, and then why don't we just make this a database decision? So it makes a lot of sense. They've also got partnerships with giants like Pfizer and AstraZeneca and all those lovely people who deeply care about your health. A bit like Nancy, really. So how do we therefore make money out of this? Isn't that the ultimate question? I mean, I think that's what Nancy wakes up in the morning to. She's like, what can I do today to make my portfolio bigger? Although I'm sure her first thought, of course, is how can I make my constituents, the people who've elected me, how I can make them wealthier and safer? And that must be at the forefront of her thought process, right? Should be, right? Do you don't think it is? Well, let me know what you make of Nancy, putting in the comments down below. But let me pull up the chart here for you in Trade Vision. So this is the kind of simplified stock chart. And what do you see? It's done nothing since June 2024. Absolutely bugger all, right? It's just exactly where it started. And then we look at the bit more detailed chart here, and you can see that in a little bit more detail. But there is one thing that I noticed, which is kind of an interesting pattern, and that is we seem to be kind of basing out here, right? So there's that sort of support developing there. We had a big sell-off there. And on that big sell-off, what I really point out is the massive volume that was selling off there. That's institutions dumping this at pretty extraordinary levels. And we didn't see that on the way up. We didn't see anywhere of that kind of trading volume. So I would argue that the people who wanted to sell, a lot of them have probably sold, because we saw some monstrous institutional dumping here over the second half of December. So is this for me a classic buy point? No, it's not. We're below the moving average. There's no clear indicator yet that we are about to moon. But then Nancy, well, she might just have a little bit of insider information, given that she sits on every committee that allows people to trade with insider information and make a lot of money. So her trade is exactly this, and you can set this up in Trade Vision. There's a week's trial to it, so you can play around with this. Up here on the right, this is options, and maybe you're not familiar with options, that's okay. Basically, she's doing the most simple trade you can, which is a long call options. You buy a call option, and then she buys them out really far here into January 2026, which is what I've selected there. And she's buying a $20 call option down here. And I can actually see how many people have done that, essentially. There are 170 call options sort of sitting there. 50 of those are hers. So almost no one's done this trade, which is peculiar. But the options are really, really very cheap right now. And that's kind of intriguing. So at the moment, her trade would cost you $1,700 US, $1,750 US. That's the worst case scenario, that you could lose all that money. You wouldn't have to, you could exit sooner, but that's the worst case scenario. And then in theory, you could make an infinite profit. Now, you probably won't, but let's say it goes back to all-time highs of $77. Well, you would make a 233% gain. So your $1,700 investment would become a $4,000 gain on top, which is not bad, right? Better than a kick in the nuts for sure. So that's essentially her setup. Now, how could you make this cheaper if you don't have $1,700? And again, I'm not saying you should follow Nancy. Well, you could move the call option up a little bit to say $35, or even a little higher to say $40. and now the trade size is $875, so it becomes a lot cheaper. Just means you get a little bit less of a gain as you go up, but still, still pretty significant gain here. And it just means, I guess, if you have you would actually get a larger gain. Sorry about that. You would actually get potentially a larger gain if you go up. So why would you then push it down lower? Well, I guess trading fees might be a factor. There's a little bit of, what's the delta down here? It's 90. Okay, the delta up here is 42. Okay, anyway, we don't need to get too technical on options here. That's not my intention. My intention is just to show you exactly what she's done and how she's done it. Speculative thing. It's a lottery ticket, and you're just relying on Nancy being right on this one. She isn't right on every trade, and I think if you watched the inauguration yesterday and saw the people who were sitting right behind Trump, Zuckerberg of Meta, Bezos of Amazon, Elon of Tesla, and Apple and Google, well, those would be much more low-risk investments to make, of course, because those companies are large, lots of cash flow, they're very unlikely to go out of business, and they have the president's ear. Tempus AI probably doesn't. Might have Nancy's ear, but that's not quite the same thing at the moment. So it's kind of an interesting thing here. But one thing I would point out really again is just that since we started selling off here on Tempus, the volume has absolutely exploded, which kind of shows a lot of people have exited this. And maybe that's people who bought pre-IPO who are exiting. That's a possibility. When was the IPO here? Was it in June 24? And maybe their lockup period is coming to an end. If it was a 6-month lockup period, and maybe that's why we're dumping here. That's a real possibility. So when you buy pre-IPO as private equity and you list, then typically you cannot sell until 6 months later. That's usually the gig, which is I think maybe why you're seeing institutional dumping here. But there's a nice little base that's forming here around $30, $31. And therefore, perhaps with Nancy's insight, it is worth a flutter. But of course, I leave that up to you. Overall, I think congressional trading should be made illegal. Yes, if you do, I think you should be flogged publicly. At present, you can trade as a congressman or woman. We no longer have any other genders we need to mention. No more, it, them, they, and that sort of nonsense. And well, if you do a trade and you don't disclose it, the might of the US government crashes down on you with a $200 fine. Wow. So you literally see a lot of these congressmen and women make trades and then disclose them late, which is kind of interesting because I don't care. It's $200, who cares? It's like whatever, right? So yeah, it's a very weird thing. I wonder if Congress is going to vote itself not to have the right to insider trade. I don't really see it. It's a bit like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. It's a fairly unlikely scenario. So we will likely to get continuous entertainment from the likes of Nancy and see how she's marvelously a better trader than, well, pretty much any other investor, hedge fund manager out there, which of course must just be because of her supreme intellect and love for her constituents. And by the way, of course, Nancy does not trade herself. It is her husband who does these trades, who doesn't talk to her, and therefore there is no even appearance of insider trading because it isn't her. She has nothing to do with it. That is genuinely her defense. So it's a very interesting setup, really, double standards in politics, right? So there we are. I hope you found this useful. Let me know what you're going to do with Tempus, if you're interested or not in this, and let me know what you think of Nancy down below. But most importantly, invest in yourself. That's really how you make 2025 the best year yet. So come and join me for about an hour and a half on Friday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern time, and I'll teach you my rules, my strategies, my systems that I learned from investment bankers, from my mentors, from hedge fund guys, from people who've managed lots and lots of money for decades. And we apply this every day, every week, and it works insanely well. Certainly has for me. So come and learn it. It's free of charge. felixprehn.org/webinar. It's my little give to you to make your 2025 the best one yet. All the best. Here is why the biggest stock market rally in a generation will take Palantir to multiples we haven't seen yet.